You've probably heard of the shared responsibility concept, but you're not sure what it means or how it affects cloud computing. Begin with a conventional corporate data center. The company is in charge of maintaining the physical facility, as well as assuring security and servicing or replacing the servers if something goes wrong. The IT department is in charge of maintaining all of the infrastructure and software required to keep the data center operational. They are also likely to be in charge of maintaining all systems patched and up to date.
The cloud provider is responsible for physical security, power, cooling, and network connectivity. Because the consumer is not co-located with the data center, it makes no sense for the user to bear any of those duties. Simultaneously, the consumer is accountable for the data and information kept on the cloud. You don't want the cloud provider to have access to your data. The consumer is also responsible for access security, which means only granting access to those who require it.
Is responsible for database maintenance. However, you are still in charge of the data that is entered into the database. If you put a SQL database in a virtual machine, you would be responsible for the database patches and upgrades, as well as the data and information stored in the database.
With an on-premise data center, you are in charge of everything. Those roles are shifting as a result of cloud computing. The shared responsibility paradigm is closely related to cloud service categories, discussed later in this section. Infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. Infrastructure as a service places the greatest burden on the consumer, with the cloud provider accountable for the fundamentals of physical security, power, and connectivity. On the opposite end of the spectrum, SaaS, or software as a service, delegated the majority of the responsibility to the cloud provider, where platform as a service is a hybrid of infrastructure and software as a service, and sits in the middle and evenly distributes responsibility between the cloud provider and the consumer. Here's a little graph to show you the responsibilities that you have from the type of system that you choose, whether it's a PaaS, SaaS, or IaaS system. In shared responsibility, you will always be accountable for the data and information stored in the cloud, the devices permitted to connect to your cloud, example cell phones, computers, etc., etc. The accounts and identities of your organization, people, services, and devices. The cloud provider is always in charge of the actual data center, the actual network, and the actual hosts. Your service model will define who is responsible for things like computer operating systems, controls for the network, application, infrastructure, and identity. The cloud shared responsibility model is a concept that defines the responsibilities of both the cloud provider and the customer in ensuring the security and availability of cloud resources. It can be compared to a marriage where both partners have specific roles and responsibilities to make the relationship work. That is, unless you have a really bad marriage. In a cloud environment, the cloud provider is responsible for security and maintenance of the underlying infrastructure, such as servers, storage, and networking. This is similar to a spouse who takes care of the house and makes sure everything is functioning properly. On the other hand, the customer is responsible for securing their own data and applications, managing access control, and configuring security settings. This is like a spouse who takes care of their personal belongings, managing their finances, and making sure that they take necessary security measures to protect themselves. Just like in a marriage, both partners have to work together to ensure a successful and secure environment. The cloud provider and the customer needs to communicate and collaborate effectively to identify potential risks and implement necessary security measures. By working together, the cloud provider and the customer can create a secure and reliable cloud environment. Let's talk about SaaS, software as a service. You probably heard me say this a few times, but SaaS stands for software as a service. In this model, a cloud provider offers a software application to the customers as a service, rather than requiring the customers to install and maintain the software on their own systems. Examples of SaaS offerings include email, services like Microsoft Office, Google Workspace, and some CRM tools. In the context of SaaS, the cloud provider is responsible for the security of the underlying infrastructure and the software applications itself. The customer is responsible for ensuring that users' access and authentication is secure, and for configuration any necessary security settings within the application. Next up is PaaS, Platform as a Service. Yep, I said it before. PaaS stands for Platform as a Service, and in this model the cloud provider offers a platform for the customers to build and deploy applications. The cloud provider manages the infrastructure and the middleware, while the customer is responsible for application itself. Examples of PaaS offerings include Azure App Service, In the PaaS, the cloud provider is responsible for the underlying infrastructure and the middleware, while the customer is responsible for the application itself. This means that the customer is responsible for securing the application code and data, while the cloud provider is responsible for securing the underlying platform. IaaS. IaaS stands for Infrastructure as a Service. In this model, the cloud provider offers virtualized computing resources, including servers, storage, networking as a service. The customer is responsible for managing the operating system, middleware applications that run on the infrastructure. Examples of IaaS offerings include Azure Virtual Machines. In IaaS, the cloud provider is responsible for securing the underlying infrastructure, including the virtualization layer, servers, storage, networking. The customer is responsible for securing the operating system, middleware, and applications running on top of that infrastructure. In a summary, the summary of the ass. In a successful marriage, yes, a big ass is important. Nope, that's not what I wanted to say. In a successful marriage, both partners have different responsibilities that contribute to overall success of the relationship. For example, one partner might be responsible for managing finances, while the other is responsible for managing the household. Now, this is exactly how the cloud works. Both the cloud provider and the customer have different responsibilities that contribute to the overall security of the environment. Now, here is a little tip for the exam. I always think of it as S-ass is single ass. It's not your responsibility. It's like dating. P-ass is your partner's ass. You provide one part, they bring the rest of the ass. And I-ass is my ass, which is your ass, which means your ass is going to be on the line. Now, you might have thought this is a very interesting lesson. This won't be in the exam, but here is a typical exam question which they will ask you about these services. Which cloud service model minimizes the management responsibility of a customer? And just like that, my tongue got twisted. A. Infrastructure as a service. B. Platform as a service. Or C. Software as a service. And the correct answer is software as a service, as we explained before. Thank you for joining us on this section of the course. We are now actually getting quite nicely into this course, and if you do like this course, please give me a rating, and I hope to see you in the next section of this course.